What? Excuse me? Bricky mentioned Darktide in his previous video that I reacted to, so I decided, you know what, since I've never seen actual gameplay of Darktide, I might as well check out this other video by Bricky. Kind of looking at whether Darktide does Warhammer well. I've heard a lot of things about Darktide. There's been a lot of mixed opinions here and there. Obviously, I'm not going to draw any conclusions because, I haven't played the game myself yet, and probably can't just yet until a new PC upgrade, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Of course, before we begin, make sure to go support the OG video. Link is always at the top of the description.
Hello everybody, my name is Bricky, currently liberating the entirety of Atoma Prime by providing them with the newest ink cleaning technology, bar soap. So Darktide sponsored my last video, and that was really awesome of them. It's nice to be noticed by the hammers.
I think he's referring to his video on how to play Darktide. I might check that out after this one. I want to check this one out first, just to get like a general concept before even delving into it further. But could have been a mistake on my part. It is what it is now.
That make war. Darktide then said,
"You want to see me do it again?"
Today's video is also sponsored by Darktide. 4 players, Shouty, Sparkhead, Sa, and Slab come together for a fantastic Nurgle-based co-op experience of survival and death. Tons of missions, tons of weapons, tons of armor, and tons of faith await you in Tertium. Down in the description is the Grimoire of Nurgle, and blessed be the number 7. So if you click it, you can then join in on this fun. Where my prior video was a discussion mainly on how to play the game, today I'd like to ask the question, how well does Darktide do Warhammer? What I mean by this is, how well does the game adapt the source material into video game form? The Warhammer universe is an extremely unique and complicated.
Okay, so I know that a lot of games and a lot of impressions that people have of Warhammer can be kind of warped depending on how they got into the series. I think this is kind of the case with fantasy, that there are some aspects of particular factions that people kind of attribute to them that it's not really true. Something that comes to my mind is like the very slow and tanky and regenerating units of Nurgle. That's not always the case for Nurgle. Once again, I could be wrong. I'm still very new to the Warhammer lore. But there's a lot more to Nurgle units than there are represented in Total War Warhammer 3. Of course, with the new DLC units, that kind of roster is filled out a bit, but that's besides the point. The point is that sometimes representations of the Warhammer lore isn't exactly accurate when it comes to video game adaptations. So we'll see if this is the case for Darktide. So far from the gameplay that I saw there in the background, the game looks pretty sharp. And I mean, from my understanding, it's basically Vermintide, but 40k.
One, and properly adapting it is difficult even at the best of times. Most of the factions in the universe take from modern day cultures or customs and then either give them a little spin on it or adapt it in some way. For example, the Necrons are a robotic Terminator vibe to begin with, and then they're blossomed up into an army of the undead mixed with a heavy Egyptian culture. The Adeptus Mechanicus are a combination of extreme steampunk mixed with like a monk culture, mixing aspects from like Tibetan monks with technophile extremism. Very weird. The Craft World Elder take after a more feudal Japanese culture. Tau a bit more of a sci-fi version. Drukhari are pirates. Tyranids have like a Lovecraft and Xenomorph mixture. And orcs are
definitely
football fans.
Orcs are.
For humanity, it's a combination of a
I do have all the Blood Bowl games. I have not checked them out yet. Maybe I should at some point, but we've all just got so much on our plate at the moment.
Fascist Big Brother style regime mixed with this kind of like Catholic witch-seeking cult and a bit of retro sci-fi like you see in the movies like Alien, and of course a ton of Gothic. Luckily for Darktide, that's really the main thing they need to focus on, humanity. Because I couldn't imagine what it would be like to have to juggle all the other factions along with them. But Warhammer games live and die on 4 major components: art direction, voice acting, music, and power scale.
These are some interesting bullet points. I guess we'll have to wait and see like the points that Bricky brings up later on in the video. I would agree with it initially here. I'd have to have a think about it, but If I think about my experience playing Mechanicus, that's fairly true. Honestly, one of the weaknesses of Mechanicus was the power scaling and the fact that you just get so incredibly OP, like near mid-game and end-game, that it kind of sucks away the fun of the game a little bit. But what I do hope Darktide gets right is definitely the balancing that goes on in the game, because recently I did a collab with my friends playing some Left 4 Dead 2 for the first time, and we kind of struggled a bit here and there on a normal difficulty because all of us were pretty much noobs to the game. We'd never really played anything like it before. Well, Nivy and Cashew had. But what we really enjoyed about it was the fact that we struggled a bit with it. And then we actually had to come up with strategies and we had to learn how to do callouts. And, it made the game so much more engaging because there was always a constant possibility of failure. If it's too easy, it's boring. If it's too hard, then, it's just not fun anymore to play, and instead it turns into a chore. That kind of balance seems incredibly difficult to find, so I'm very interested to see what Bricky's take is on it when in regards to Darktide, if we're even going to get to anything like that in the video.
Scaling in that order, most important to least. Let's start with art direction.
With this tool, I shall give birth.
Art is very important for 40K.
In order to pull off the Imperium's aesthetic, everything needs to look like a massive factory and a church simultaneously. It needs to have skulls and parchment paper absolutely everywhere. For the most part, I'd say they pull this off with flying colors. Walking around the Morning Star shows this off quite well. The entire place looks like you're on the inside of a monolithic church with the...
This is really cool because this kind of reminds me of the main room in Mechanicus when you're on your ship, but we can only kind of see it from one angle because it's not really the point of the game. But here you get to run around in it, and that's kind of awesome, to me at least.
Statues of imperial heroes and the architecture of things like even just the windows. But within that church, it feels like a military station. Like a church itself is going to war, which is pretty accurate. The cable management here makes me want to dry heave. It just goes and goes and goes, circling around metal and steel in an infinite loop. And dangerously close to those cables are candles. And by the throne, there are so many candles. Now we mix those candles with parchment and purity seals, which we are just absolutely covered in. The purity seals are, by the way, those little wax seals and pieces of parchment you see everywhere. They are inscribed with holy duties, prayers, scripture, all kinds of blessings that are supposed to resemble a lack of chaos taint or just duty to the god emperor. As you can tell, they kind of go hand with this stuff. Also, side note, the ship, it's called the Morning Star, which first harkens to the medieval weapon, right? The big Morning Star. But then you realize it's the Morning Star, as in mourning the dead, plus star, spaceships, the Morning Star. It's a pretty good ship name. Now, there's always a possible worry about lack of skulls. There needs to be enough skulls.
Serval skulls
game
everywhere.
Does not have a lack of skulls. In Warhammer, AI is illegal. So all mechanisms require a human brain, normally lobotomized and reprogrammed in order to operate, among a few other things. This is why we have servo skulls flying around. They're little, servant skulls. They're the classic line, like,
Hans, are we the baddies?
Well, you should absolutely be thinking that the entire time playing the game.
That's kind of the entire point of 40K and its appeal. That everybody's kind of the villain, that we all do horrible stuff just to survive. And even in death, you still have to serve the Imperium as a serval skull or whatnot. I don't think they use criminals to make serval skulls. I think those were in Mechanicus, those were just kind of the meat shields that we had used. Servitors, I think they were called. But yeah, can't waste any resources. No matter how useless you might be to society, don't worry. Will make you useful.
Game, and I think they met their skull quota quite well. As for each of the classes, the guardsman looks pretty right. I'd say you could maybe 40s them up a tiny bit more. Maybe a few hanging baubles here and there, like a tiny little incense jar or an aquila here or there. But the guardsman's a hard one since depending on where you come from, their culture
there's so many different designs
substantially. So it really depends on what you're trying to go for. The zealot is pretty on point. I really have no issues there. That's kind of perfect. When I think of a zealot, that's about right. The psyker is good, but I wish the actual character could have a bit more mutations. If you see the Navigator class in the new Rogue Trader game, they're pretty mutated compared to the normal humans. The Psyker does have a few options, right? Like strange stuff you can do with their eyes, like pitch black. But I would have liked maybe just a bit more weird bits added to it to really spice up that creepy factor. Unsanctioned Psykers are sometimes like the fucking Exorcist girl. So adding a bit more would be pretty dope. Ogre.
I suppose that would make sense because, well, you know, you're connected to the warp and the warp kind of mutated people, especially back during, what was it, the Age of Strife, when a bunch of Psykers just appeared out of nowhere and people were going crazy and mutating and it was just an entire mess there. Yeah, I would imagine that it's kind of calmed down. Maybe, if you could even call it that. For a Psyker, the model does seem a little bit bland.
Are nearly perfect. Like when I first started playing this game, I was going to comment that the ones in the game were way too smart.
Ogrins are humans. What's that mean?
Ogrins are kind of like demi-humans, right? I mean, obviously from the name, they're a mix between like orcs and regular humans. I forget what planet they were from. Pretty sure we learned about them in Major Kill's video about all the guardsmen regiments. And there was some art in a particular like guardsman regiment that was consisted of Ogrins. Or maybe it was because the planet that they live on just had a very high gravitational pull, making it so that all of them were just much naturally just way stronger than everybody. But yeah, apologies if this is a little bit inaccurate. There's so much lore that I have to go through and remember. But this does sound kind of familiar.
Is it insult? Better not be insult.
But then they mention the Bone Edge ship they have.
I got metal machine here, but I'm okay.
Which I have to commend because I was totally okay with saying, yeah, they're way too smart for normal Ogrins, but video game, you want them to talk with the squad mates, like I'm okay with that. But but they literally thought of something. I didn't even have to use that excuse. Like, bravo. Because yeah, Ogrins are normally just complete infants. Like, what?
Really?
They actually thought of it with the Bone Edge ship. That's Finally, when it comes to Nurgle, I'd say it hits about 80% of the way. From gameplay purposes, it definitely is a bit too generic zombie at times, not to mention the amount of dude with guns they rely on, but we are definitely fighting a more Nurgle corrupted hive city as opposed to fighting Nurgle's demons. So this is to be expected, but I think I could do with a bit more.
I see. So we fight against the forces of Nurgle mostly in Darktide. It's kind of hard for me to imagine what a Nurgle corrupted force in 40k would optimally look like. What comes to my mind is the Chaos Space Marines that joined Nurgle. They look pretty funky. And I mean, I know what Nurgle looks like, obviously. But these dudes that we just saw here in the gameplay that Bricky showed were, yeah, I agree, they were kind of just zombie dudes. With a hint of green here and there. Maybe we have to have more mutations. Or, well, mutation isn't exactly Nurgle's thing. That's more of Zinch's thing. Spikes? Green? A lot more green? I don't know. Let's see what Bricky has to say.
Horror. That gigantic tree with the eyes and the horrifying faces are perfect. And the Beast of Nurgle is pretty disgusting too. I would have liked maybe some plague bearers as an enemy or a plague drone instead of the plague ogrim. That being said, I think Nurgle was the strongest choice for enemy in this kind of game. I'd kill for a Tzeentch or a Slaanesh style, but
yeah, if you wanted to do those factions with like actual lore accurate enemies, Tzeentch would be very difficult to put into the game. Maybe you could just make it like a magic caster, but then like Tzeentch's actual abilities, yeah, I don't know how you'd even program that. And then as for Slaanesh, you probably wouldn't be able to, you know, sell your video game anywhere. Not even with an M rating. In which case, what about Khorne then? I mean, Khorne should probably fit in real good in any kind of like action game like this. I do want to mention though that something I think was like really cool for me personally is the fact that I know some of these units from Total War Warhammer. I mean, the demons are kind of shared across both universes, so yeah, that makes sense. But the point I'm getting at is that I get to fight them and you gotta like see them in a first person perspective, like on the battlefield rather than over the top of it, commanding an entire army. And when you're actually there, like facing off against a rattling gunner, just one singular rattling gunner, it is actually terrifying. You don't get that sense when you're playing Total War, but when you're playing Vermintide, yeah, it's right there. And I think it would be cool to kind of like fight off a Plague Bearer in Darktide, just to see how it would be like.
That would be really hard to do well. I don't know how you'd pull off a Tzeentch Horde game or a Slanesh Horde game without getting a much more than M-rated game. Nurgle, for the most part, is pretty excellent. I do want a little bit more Nurgle demons and stuff, but I also need to temper my expectations because I want to see all the things. But as far as art direction goes, this game might be the strongest. You have a solid case that Battlefleet Gothic 2 and Mechanicus might give it a run for its money.
They have good art
directions. It's a damn hard one, but it's not surprising since like the success of Vermintide goes a long way, but it's still real treasure to see. Now, second on our list is voice acting.
Okay, let's see. How is it? I would say for me, voice acting is very important. It's not needed. If your game doesn't have voice acting, it can still be very good. But how should I put this in the most accurate way possible? It can be kind of a double-edged sword. Let me know if you guys also think this, but for me, if a game has incredible voice acting, it can really enhance the quality of the game by like 2 to 3 times. But if it has mid or poor voice acting, it can kind of break the game for me. I suppose that also depends on like what you're going into the game for. A lot of people play the games just purely for gameplay. They don't care about anything about story or voice acting or art or whatever. And, you know, that's fine. That's your version of fun. But for me, I really care about the narrative and having a good reason and having good characters to kind of get attached to. Like, why am I even here? What am I even doing? Who am I doing it for? I want to have a purpose when I'm doing an action in a video game. And sometimes voice acting really destroys a character for me and just makes me not want to play it. I'm sorry. I'm going to mention it again. For any of you guys who watch the Three Houses streams, I've mentioned it quite often. But Fire Emblem Engage has very mid to poor voice acting in it. And my gripes with the writing aside, the voice acting itself is, yeah, that's kind of a deal breaker for me. I will say, though, that my experience with 40k games, as well as seeing reviews of other 40k games, usually the voice acting for them is pretty top-notch, so expecting great things here.
Proper 40k voice acting is probably a combination of incredibly fun to do and terrible on the voice.
Yeah.
It also forces you into the frightening realm of British accents.
Another set of useless bloody orders from some useless bloody carcass.
Like most of humanity has that British accent since, you know, Games Workshop is a British company. And they have been a fan of that old hobby called colonization. Though there are a ton of accents for the most part, it's just British is the standard. As for the voice acting itself, fervor is the most important aspect. You need to say your lines with your chest. The ability to really sell that, yes, this person believes what they are saying is the needle point there. And you know when an actor becomes so large, you stop seeing the character they're playing and instead start seeing the actor only? Like I had this issue with Leonardo DiCaprio. I can only ever see him as that. Warhammer has no room for that. You must become the character. You must.
That's actually a good point when it comes to like famous actors. And I think that's actually a genuine problem so many actors have faced in their careers when any movie that they play in becomes like a classic that they just can't play in any other movie anymore. Just to, you know, they can't get any other jobs because they were just too good at one particular job. Or even if we dial it back down to something a little closer to home, like as a YouTube content creator, for instance, if you have something in particular that goes viral and then for whatever reason that becomes the one thing that you're known about, then it can be very easy for people to completely ignore the other things that you make and you're passionate about. And that's when you end up getting stuck with just making the same thing over and over and over again until, well, that ends up dying later on.
See yourself in this bizarre world, and every line must be delivered with that pinpoint accuracy. For the veteran, I give them like a solid B+ here. Guardsmen are a bit difficult since they're the everyman sometimes, so it's occasionally hard to do it properly and dissolve into that character. But I think this is as close as we're gonna get with the packs we have. The professional has a clean-cut accent.
This is life in a hive city. I'll stay with the guard. Give my fragging right arm to see the golden throne. Just one skill log wouldn't last a day in the guard. You know that? Oh, nice shot. Nice fragging shot.
The loose cannon definitely adds a bit more comic relief.
Help me get even with our pilot, would you? Took me for everything, and now I have to... Oh, no, you don't need to know.
But the standout for me is the cutthroat from Cadia. He has that poisonous speech that comes from someone who's just really fucking pissed off all the goddamn time. And that is how I imagine Cadia is probably feel right now.
The priest is creepy. She knows the stuff. If I start speaking in ones and zeros, put me down, yeah?
Ones and zeros?
You wouldn't have lasted a day on Cadia. Is that right? And how's things working out for Cadia right now?
Dang!
I'll say it for you. I'm not scared. You'll come apart at the last moment.
Oh my god.
Like Cadia.
The Zealot. Oh my god.
With the bit of lore that I know about Cadia and how Cadia broke before the guard, that makes a lot of sense to have that kind of voice and that kind of attitude. I'd be really pissed too if my home planet blew up.
The Zealots. Oh, they achieve a standout A++ extra credit with their voice lines. They have absolutely nailed it.
If in doubt, kindred, place your faith in fire. The hotter, the better.
All 6 sound fantastic. And I love how they went with different types of piety for them. They range between all kinds of emotions. They had like dorky Bible study priests.
What unfathomable might hath the master of mankind, that he unites 1,000,000 worlds beneath his banner.
The holier than thou attitude, and of course, like the judge, who has the emperor's light in their lungs.
What? Excuse me? Well, that's a twist on the line. Coming dangerously close to heresy, but yeah, still a part of the Imperium, aren't you?
The VA work here is brilliant. No complaints. As for the Psyker, it can be a bit hit or miss. However, I wouldn't say the hit or miss comes from the performance, but rather the actual voice lines being said. The crazy, shrill loner lady and also the insane German Psyker say some heretical things.
The Emperor survives on human flesh and human blood. His Imperium likewise.
Probably should mention that, yeah.
Tis a glorious attempt by Lord Guliman to unite the Master's realm across the scar of chaos.
The lengths some will go to in order to earn a
Honest to God, Emperor, they would have been just gone significantly sooner. Just like, hey, what's up, everyone? It's me, Psyker, you know, the Carrion Emperor, and then... What? But some do mix that hybrid of terrifyingly scary and funny at the same time. They don't have outright poltergeist, which is too bad, despite understanding why they wouldn't, but it's too bad. I would have loved that. Though I think the standout here might actually be the one that constantly talks about the Emperor as his beloved.
At least the Emperor's wiggle.
You hear that, beloved? He's talking about you. I can teach you my secret.
Are you okay, bro?
It has 15 vowels. Oh, I do enjoy your company. I wish you were all real.
Oh my
Wake
god.
up anytime and spit us your company.
I think that's just the right mix of kooky crazy, but still lucid and understanding. Though the female savant one, I do think adds the right amount of classic damaged mage.
You should be more careful with those stray thoughts. I might get offended. Please, sibling, have some professional courtesy. Efficient, Psyker. I grant you that. It's called skill, Zealot.
Finally, the Ogren is just great. It's
Actually a
perfect.
gamer.
Most people go with the angry, like, bottom 8 Xenos one, and I couldn't be happier. All 3 versions are wonderful. They all have good voice lines, but just, I love that one a lot. It's so fun. It's so, like, dorky and just having a good time, Ogren, man. I'll keep this short, because the Ogren wouldn't understand me anyway. Good job, big man. The supporting cast is the only group I feel could use a bit more oomph with them. Sergeant Major Moro guy, he's pretty on point. I think he does quite well, but Explicator Zola and the pilot feel not bad, just there. They're there to serve their function and not much more. And I think they could use a bit more oomph in some of their delivery. I like Hadron a lot, though, a lot. Despite the fact that she has this, like...
This is interesting. I suppose there's like a section, well, we did see it early in the video, where you explore on your ship and then you can even talk with the NPCs there. For the most part in Vermintide 2, the most we've ever conversed with anybody outside of the group is just the shopkeeper, and he just gets really mad at us when we don't buy anything. But I guess here in Darktide, it's much more fleshed out.
Like Gilf energy to her. I maybe would have preferred her a bit more robotic and a bit more talking like this kind of way. But then we wouldn't get the sass, and I like the sass.
All this for a few Lehman Russes. Doesn't seem worth it.
Atonement war is harder, better, gooder. Am I saying that right? Do you understand?
Still, the main ensemble of characters is really damn good, and a combination of all 4, I think, is the best group. You know, it kind of makes you think of Edda and Eddie. You know, I mean, that's only 3, but like Ed is the ogre, and Double D is the psyker, and Eddie is the guardsman. Throw a zealot in there, and you've got Cartoon Network's best show. Their best show. I will not hear otherwise. Who would?
Dang. Who knew that Bricky was an Ed, and Eddie fan? I did used to watch those cartoons back in the day. Don't remember much of them, though. Can't say if this opinion is correct. I did enjoy Charge the Cowardly Dog, though. I forget what channel that was on.
Win the Chaos Gods or Ed with a rock in his shoe? Okay, music.
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
Hopefully the music is good.
Patrick, mayonnaise is not an instrument.
So,
oh my god, Patrick. Music in Mechanicus was absolutely fire. The way they incorporated the organ, as well as kind of the synths and stuff. I don't know music, please. I'm sorry if I'm referring to it incorrectly, but it just feels so good. Music can certainly make or break a game for me as well. I feel like I've said that. I feel like I've said that about the other things. But video game OSTs are something that I listen to while I'm working. It's just something that I guess you could say I'm passionate about. I remember a lot of the names of OSTs from different games that I played, just because they really stuck in my mind. And a game without a good OST, I guess it's still playable if the gameplay is good. But it's not going to be that, you know, that game that you play over and over and over again and become one of your favorites because the music just really can't immerse you like that. To be completely honest with you, I don't remember a particular track from Vermintide 2. It could also be because of the fact that I usually only play it with the bros, and so we're usually screaming our heads off when one of us gets taken. And, you know, it's kind of hard to listen to the music in those kind of scenarios, but hopefully the Darktide music is good. If you haven't listened to the Mechanicus OST, though, I highly recommend it.
40K is quite gothic as a setting, but since it's a gothic sci-fi hybrid, soundtracks need to fuse that old with the new. Normally they do this by mixing organ music with either a more modern beat or electronic instruments. Warhammer music varies, but it often has to feel like it's a tale being told. For example, in Dawn of War 2, the Space Marines had a triumphant, heroic theme that really expressed the feeling of like a victorious saga being told.
Very cool. Can't wait to play Dawn of War.
Whereas something like Mechanicus is a bit more inquisitive, you know?
Here we
Still
go.
classic, so to speak, but they basically got gothic dubstep.
I mean, well, yeah, basically. It's just such a good track for a strategy game, a turn-based strategy game, you know? It's not too much, but it's enough to keep you in the fight. Such a fitting theme for the Mechanicus.
And then there's the orcs. Darktide has decided to go the organ.
I've heard of that game. I've yet to play it. I don't own it. But I remember hopping into another VTuber's stream. She was streaming, I think it was Trexie. Don't know if any of you guys have seen any of her streams before. But that music slaps. As a fan of heavy metal, I really appreciate that soundtrack.
Route. Though it seems like it's more like organ club music, like the kind of music you'd expect to hear in a big city that is also heavily gothic, at least during its combat themes, which are excellent.
Interesting. Okay, I see where Bricky's coming from with the club vibe. To be honest, personally for me, it doesn't really hit as hard. Maybe it's the kind of thing that you had to experience while playing the game for it to hit. But yeah, not my kind of music, unfortunately. Ooh, Night Strider though. Kind of like this one.
Mr. Jesper Kid has done an enviable job creating not only great soundtracks that are good on their own, but also fit in universe. A ton of choir, mixed with the organs, mixed with the strings, and great inserts of electronic combinations add a ton to it. It's a rarity that you can take the theme, like Night Strider, which is played in the Psyker character trailer, and have it fit in a 40K game, despite it feeling like a badass 8-bit remix theme.
Maybe that's why I like it. I actually do enjoy the, you know, the badass 8-bit remix themes. Yeah, initially the one track that did stick out to me was Night Strider, but I suppose if we're talking about, you know, fitting the setting, then yeah, it goes along with that. Just not my preference, I suppose.
Being able to fit that kind of soundtrack in this game is a testament. It hits all the right beats, one after the other. They even found a way to sneak in the Skaven fiddle in just a little bit of the background of the main theme, which is also a banger.
Yeah, you can hear it. I see.
The only tracks I'm not huge on are probably the ones where an abomination is present, especially the Beast of Nurgle one. It's a bit grating on the ears on the higher difficulties, which take a ton of time to kill the damn thing. But then on the other side of the spectrum, that boss music though.
Yo, this one bopping though. Yeah, I agree, Cat.
Now, there's a bit of an honorable mention for sound design in this game, which does play a big part in it, but I don't include it much because what one company thinks a lasgun sounds like can be wildly different than what another company thinks it does. And both often sound good, but there is no dedicated lasgun sound. So, you know, it's kind of hard to rate sound effects in a 40K game. As long as they sound good, because, I mean, don't worry, they sound fine. Lastly, but not least, we can talk about power scaling.
It's over 9,000!
Power scaling is very important. The level of power from something like an Orc Grot to a Guardsman to an Eldar Ranger, then a Space Marine, then a Necron Destroyer, then a Chaos Possessed, then a Custodian, and we haven't even talked vehicles or demons yet. Like, the differences from low to high are ludicrous,
very vast.
And then you have to deal with who's writing the book or game, and that takes a lot of effort to get properly correct. As far
power scaling gets pretty over the top in the 40K universe. However, it is something that you have to pay attention to because you need to maintain that sense of cohesiveness within the lore to create a believable story. Whenever you do mess up the power scaling, the hardcore fans of your series will know. And it just, you know, it really ruins the image of what you had previously established before. And then it just makes it so that people don't want to get too invested in your universe because you just keep on changing things. Like, for instance, the avatar of Cain, I believe. In Pancreas No Works video on Caiaphas Cain, the avatar of Cain ended up showing up, but, you know, got beaten down, as always, apparently. And I learned from the comment sections that those avatars usually just exist to get beaten down to make another character look more badass, but they're supposed to be incredibly powerful. So what's going on there? And that kind of discrepancy sticks in people's minds. So I suppose, yeah, I'd have to agree that it does matter a lot when it comes to something like 40k, where obviously it's a very big part of the story and of the lore.
As this game is concerned, I think the amount of restraint should be commended. Some things are not perfectly in tune with the lore, mainly the influence of Nurgle. I mean, the mere existence of us in this hive city, we should be firing out on both ends. But considering our characters, the enemies we fight on an individual level, it's pretty accurate. The issue comes from which character you play. Like, the Veteran and Zealot are the weakest in universe. Yeah, it's completely accurate, somewhat at least, to take on a bunch of Poxwalkers or Guardsmen and come out the victor. Hell, even some of the specials, that's completely fine. If we are to assume that our reject is, you know, special, you know, main character special.
Well, obviously. I mean, that's kind of the only way you could put a guardsman into the game with a bunch of other classes that obviously outclass your usual guardsmen and have them fit and be able to fight on an equal footing. So to be honest, here I'd even go so far as to give them the benefit of the doubt. Just, you know, make a fun game, even if the power balancing isn't quite to scale. Although I suppose there's plenty of ways that you could augment a guardsman in order to make their combat capabilities on par with the other peeps here. I wouldn't know of any specific examples to do that. I don't know, maybe some attachments from a Mechanicus or you know, just being that seasoned of a veteran in combat. But yeah, if you guys have any ideas, let me know. Or if there have been like any specific examples of a guardsman kind of getting upgrades to fight on the same level as something much greater than them.
For the most part, the things we fight, the regular enemies, totally okay. Where things get a bit tougher is when we start dealing with the higher level enemies, like the mutants and especially the abominations, like the Plague Ogre, the Beasts of Nurgle. There, our Ogre and Psyker friend come in handy. Psykers are weird, though, in a sense, because they can either be insane wizards with unimaginable power or completely uncontrollable madmen. In fact, they can easily be a detriment to your team. In game, if they perils, they explode and get downed. In universe, if they perils, then a Beast of Nurgle grows out of their body and kills us all. But that's a game thing, and I don't mind that at all. Still,
yeah, okay, you have to give it to them there, right? I mean, it does make sense. They use too much power from the warp, then demons of the warp just kind of spawn from their body. That, yeah, it is what it is. But this is kind of similar to the Fire Mage in Vermintide 2. If you use too much of her fire, she just kind of blows up. I guess that's kind of the mechanic that we're going for here. Makes sense, of course, that you don't spawn a Beast of Nurgle. Imagine if you did. Psyker would be a very unbalanced class.
The mere capability of one on the team ups our survival rating a decent amount. And the Ogren, oh my god, even more so. And Ogren is just gargantuan. They could probably beat up some Space Marines in a 1v1 fight. Like, no guns, no weapons, like just like two people in the ring. I'd say they could probably do it. It's a little bit like a David and Goliath. Calling a Space Marine David. It's a bit of a David and Goliath thing, but they are large enough to do so. The thing is, in actual lore, Space Marines are too smart. They'll kill them from a distance and they'll have knives and stuff. So there is that. But even so, I'm going on a tangent. The Ogre ups us massively.
Interesting. I didn't know that the Ogrins were just that strong, though, that they'd even be able to face off against a Space Marine in a fair fist fight.
The power of an Ogren, the actual genuine strength of an Ogren should not be underestimated. They will rip you in half like a wishbone. They are gigantic. As far as the enemies go, the Beast of Nurgle is a really weird creature to exist, though. It's straight up a demonic entity, which cannot exist on its own. See, in 40k, demons don't have, like, a form in real space. They can only exist in the warp. So in order for a demon to exist here, there has to be some level of rip into real space that feeds it life. Or I guess it could have possessed something, sure, but that seems a bit less likely considering that we also have the Plague Ogren, which was possessed, obviously. But if I'm correct in this theory, it means somewhere, something in Tertium is feeding warp energy into real space. And that's a massive fucking problem that may or may not be dealt with in the future. I don't remember there being a mention of it, so that's just where my conclusion lies. However, I'm glad that Fat Shark showed restraint and didn't jerk us off too hard with how strong we are. The boss enemies in this game are often just like captains with plasma pistols and refractor field generators.
Okay. I see where we were going with this. That, yeah, no, we're probably not going to be able to take down like a demon Chaos Lord Space Marine or whatever that guy was called in the end of Space Marine 1. That feels way too out of our league for a small band of well, these guys. And yeah, while the fight might have been cool and, you know, just the power fantasy of it all, it creates, once again, the world just becomes a bit unbelievable. And it kind of pulls you out of the experience. So yeah, I agree on this with Bricky.
Raiders. Two, granted, extremely powerful pieces of equipment that often like company commanders in the guard will carry. So it's absolutely in line that a strong-ass captain who serves chaos with good-ass gear can serve as the game's boss fight. Now, some people ask, would a single Space Marine work as a final boss? One Space Marine, like a final boss. And to that I say, the tiniest maybe. If there was a Space Marine, it would be a Death Guard, most likely. Death Guard are slow, but they're still Marines. And if he is equipped with a bolter, then the damage he would dish out would be unrecoverable. He would take us all out pretty quick. Also,
dude, you don't really get a scale of how powerful a Space Marine is and how scary they actually are in combat until you see something like Astartes, the animation. I did react to that a very long time ago, and my god, the way those Space Marines just went into that ship, walked all over the enemy, despite them doing every single thing correctly in order to ambush them and use the most powerful weapons in the best way possible, they still won. Space Marines are just insane when it comes to combat level. There are also far too many things in the 40k universe that can chomp down on quite a few Space Marines at the same time. So yeah, it would make sense that they have to be that strong, you know?
So being in a square mile of a Death Guard Marine often comes with an ungodly amount of disease and probably in-game debuffs with it too. If anything, the best boss fight would be hide and seek. The only thing that would give us a chance is the Ogren and the Psyker. Warp power could definitely do damage, and the Ogren is still very, very strong. I suppose certain weapons like the Thunder Hammer and Plasma Gun would be pretty handy too, but it's still a little iffy. I would be okay with it if it was something ridiculous, like a level 5 mission where you had to play through the mission, do a boss fight against him, he gets away, more mission, boss fight again, different weapon, let's say, gets away, then boss fight again, final boss fight, like a 3-stage boss fight. You know, you go mission, fight, mission, fight, mission, fight. I'm having an Ogren moment, something like that. Like, it needs to be really goddamn hard. It has to be a spectacle, or else it loses its scaling purposes.
I mean, it could be fun as like a in-game event or something, or as like a special challenge that they add in. That's like damn near impossible to beat.
But for now, here, tough ass dude with a plasma pistol and a refractor shield, perfect. Exactly what I was hoping for. But at the end of the day, right, combining these things together, art direction, voice acting, music, and power scaling, Warhammer is an extremely hard medium to adapt properly. It takes a lot of the standard sci-fi conventions and outright says, no, do the opposite. Complete removal of tolerance, no AI whatsoever. It's taking what was a prosperous sci-fi universe and then giving it 10,000 years of degradation into ignorance, and then make them proud of it. For all the difficulties, I think Darktide gets a solid A on it. If there was a game to show someone and say, this is as close as I can get to explaining what Warhammer 40k is like, at least from the human point of view, it's this one. My hat is tipped to all the artists, designers, voice actors, and musicians that came together to make it possible, to make this world feel the way it does. Still plenty of hat tipping to the other devs too, but for this kind of thing, extra hat tipping, triple the tip. It could not have been easy, but I believe it has paid off. If you'd like to jump into it, it is in the description. Check it out. It's not a perfect game. Some things I will discuss more about in a future video, but it is still a damn fun one. And I have thoroughly enjoyed my time with it.
Overall, the game sounds a lot better than my preconception of it, at least from what I had heard about it from so many reviews and just other people talking about it in comment sections and stuff. There's obviously a lot of things that this game was able to do correctly, as well as, you know, it being a 4-player co-op. It just means like an infinite amount of fun with you and the bros. So I'm actually really excited to try this one out at some point in the future. You can see a lot of mechanics here that I personally got introduced to when I was playing Vermintide 2 for the first time, that were kind of just expanded upon. And I feel like there's just a lot more going on with this game than there was in Vermintide 2, despite Vermintide 2, you know, being a fantastic game already in of itself. But here you can see that the scope kind of widened a bit. And because of that, maybe some things fell through the cracks, and obviously any game has a few problems here and there. But the overall picture still seems pretty fun and true to the 40k universe. So yeah, once again, reminder to go and support the OG video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.